They thought nobody was watching. They really did. They came in with chainsaws and chippers onto my land, onto the 50 acres of Douglas fir my wife, Clara, had planted, loved, and nurtured for 15 years, and by the time I drove back from my trip, there was nothing left but raw, bleeding stumps stretching across the red Dakota soil like bones in a forgotten graveyard. The HOA president, a woman named Veronica Sterling, watched the whole thing from her glass-walled office, sending me an email later that simply read, "Abatement complete. Welcome to Aspen Ridge." What she didn't realize was that I wasn't just some disgruntled homeowner. I was a former federal auditor, and my mind was a steel trap trained for one thing: following the paper trail to the bitter, undeniable truth. And Veronica, she had just given me a very personal reason to open the biggest audit of my life. I remember standing there, the scent of fresh pine resin, sweet and sharp, cutting through the December air, the same scent that used to cling to Clara's hair. We had bought this farm, parcel 517A, 3 months after she lost her brief but brutal battle with the rare kind of cancer that gives you too little time to say goodbye. Her final wish wasn't for a monument or a fancy funeral. It was for me to take care of her 350 Christmas trees. "They're everything I'm leaving behind, Arthur," she whispered, her hand cold in mine. I promised. And now, they were all gone, executed by strangers under the orders of a woman who had absolutely no legal claim to my property. I knew this because before I signed the deed, I had meticulously checked the 1992 plat map filed with Summit County. My farm was clearly, explicitly outside the Aspen Ridge Homeowners Association boundary. I had even sent Veronica a certified letter stating this fact after she mailed me the first bogus violation notice. She hadn't replied. She had just sent the chainsaws instead. As I surveyed the destruction, a Douglas County cruiser pulled up, followed by a pristine, pearl-white Lexus. Veronica stepped out, immaculate in a crimson St. John's suit, her platinum bob unmoved by the wind, a walking monument to unearned confidence. She didn't even look at me. She addressed the young deputy, Officer Jensen, with practiced smoothness. "Officer, thank you for responding so quickly. This gentleman has been making aggressive threats against our enforcement staff. We simply had to act to ensure the community's safety." I stared at the deputy, watching the calculation happen in his eyes. The expensive suit versus the sweaty guy surrounded by sawdust. "Mr. Vance," the deputy said carefully, "Mrs. Sterling called us for a harassment complaint. The tree situation, that sounds like a civil matter. You'll need an attorney for that." "A civil matter?" I asked, my voice dangerously even. "What's civil about cutting down $85,000 worth of trees, based on a jurisdiction you don't possess?" Veronica's smile widened, a cold, predatory thing. "The value is irrelevant, Mr. Vance. It was an unauthorized commercial operation in violation of our covenants. I let them leave. I knew the game now. She was establishing a paper trail to paint me as the volatile aggressor, forcing me to fight her on her terms. But that was a mistake, because I don't fight on other people's terms. I fight with numbers. Near the eastern fence, half buried in the disturbed earth, I found Clara's planting journal, green leather, worn smooth by her hands. I picked it up, brushing off the dirt. And that's when I saw it, a rough work glove, discarded, with a small, embroidered logo, S.F.T. Tucked inside was a crumpled carbon copy receipt. I smoothed it out, and the words hit me like a physical blow. Sold to Sterling Family Trust. 350 units. $85,000. Payment. Wire transfer. 350. The exact number of trees Clara had planted. I closed her notebook, the hard feeling in my chest crystallizing into purpose. Veronica Sterling wasn't just a petty HOA dictator. She was a thief, and a clumsy one at that. The next morning, the bureaucratic wall went up. The Summit County Clerk's office informed me the 1992 plat maps for my area were undergoing digitization, a process that would take 6 to 8 weeks. The timing was perfect, the lie transparent. And yes, the digitization request had come from Aspen Ridge HOA, dated 3 weeks before I even closed on the farm. She had been waiting for me. I didn't waste time arguing with local government. My first call was to the Colorado State Archives in Denver. The local office might be compromised, but the state keeps the master copies. 48 hours later, a certified, high-resolution scan of the original 1992 boundary survey landed in my inbox. I printed it, spreading it across my kitchen table under the pale glow of my lamp. There was the boundary line of Aspen Ridge. My parcel 517, it was clearly outside. But what made my heart sink was what I saw along the northern and western borders. 28 other parcels, all marked with the exact same exclusion notation. I wasn't the only victim. I was just the most recent. For the next 4 days, sleep was optional. I downloaded 8 years of HOA tax filings, Form 990, pulling the financial statements Veronica had signed under penalty of perjury. The numbers screamed. Aspen Ridge claimed 220 dues-paying households, but the county assessor only showed 192 properties within the actual legal boundary. That meant 28 properties, my neighbors, had been paying dues to a non-existent authority for 8 years. I calculated the total, roughly $1.1 million stolen through annual dues alone. Then came the Sterling Family Trust. I pulled the corporate filings, registered agent, Veronica M. Sterling, business purpose, real estate and agricultural commodities. I cross-referenced the trust with HOA records I obtained through a records request that hit a lesser-known state compliance code. I found repeated transfers from something called the Aspen Ridge Community Enhancement Fund, a slush fund Veronica controlled completely, to the Sterling Family Trust. The enhancement fund was her laundromat, and the stories I uncovered were horrifyingly consistent. There was Mr. Silas Thorne, an 82-year-old retired history teacher, who had his classic '69 Chevrolet C10 pickup truck, a showpiece, seized for a vehicle storage violation. The trust sold it at auction for $65,000. There was Mrs. Helen Miller, a widow who had her late husband's custom-built gazebo demolished because it was unauthorized construction, and the trust collected $18,000 in salvage. All of them lived on one of the 28 excluded parcels. Veronica targeted the elderly, the isolated, the ones who wouldn't have the fight left in them. But her own history was the final puzzle piece. Court records showed her husband died suddenly in 2016, leaving Veronica with $450,000 in leveraged debt. 3 months later, running unopposed, she was elected HOA president. 6 months after that, the Sterling Family Trust was formed. By 2023, the debt was paid, and she bought a vacation home in Vail for $1.8 million cash. The timeline wasn't a coincidence. It was a confession. The day I finished the audit, an aggressive legal notice arrived from Veronica's firm, demanding $78,000 in back dues and threatening foreclosure on my farm within 30 days. She wasn't playing defense. She was going for the kill shot, hoping to bury me before I could speak. I needed allies. I identified the 28 excluded homeowners and sent them all an identical, anonymous letter. Your property is not legally part of Aspen Ridge HOA. You have been paying dues to an organization with no authority over you. If you want proof, meet me at the Old Pioneer Chapel, December 15th, 7 p.m. 19 people showed up. Silas Thorne, leaning on his cane, Helen Miller clutching a faded permit, and a dozen others, people who had been intimidated, fined, and robbed over 8 years. I unrolled the certified plat map and let them see the red line for themselves. The room erupted. I refinanced my home to pay a $12,000 emergency assessment she invented, cried one man. She made me tear down my son's treehouse, wept a mother. Then, a woman stood up in the back. She looked exhausted, her face a road map of moral conflict. My name is Janet Sterling, she said quietly. Veronica is my sister-in-law. I'm on the HOA board. I've seen the agenda for the pre-annual meeting. She's moving to shred all financial records older than 3 years next Tuesday, citing storage limitations. Shred the evidence. The timing was audacious. I spent the next 3 days creating my drop. I wrote a calm, clinical, 6-page email identifying myself, detailing the evidence, the plat map, the trust, the $1 million in fraud, and attached the entire spreadsheet and every supporting document. I sent it to every single email address in the Aspen Ridge directory, courtesy of Janet. The subject line was simple: the truth about Aspen Ridge HOA. Within a day, the HOA community board was chaos. Some demanded Veronica's immediate resignation. Others called for my arrest for harassment and libel. Veronica herself issued a terse, one-sentence denial. But Janet confirmed the secret board meeting was canceled. Veronica knew she couldn't touch those files now without explicitly confirming my allegations. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place the next afternoon when my phone rang. "Mr. Vance, this is Detective Riley from the Summit County Sheriff's Office. The FBI has requested that we reach out to you regarding potential wire fraud involving the Aspen Ridge HOA. I told them I'd be available after the annual meeting." December 20th, 7 p.m. The Aspen Ridge Community Center was packed. Easily 350 people, the same number of trees she took. Every folding chair was filled. People lined the walls. A local news reporter was taking notes in the third row. Veronica Sterling sat on the stage, radiant in a black Chanel suit, her smile a perfect, unmoving facade. She knew I was coming, and she was going to face me down. I walked to the front row, placed my leather satchel with the USB drive next to my ankle, and put Clara's green notebook on my lap. She opened the meeting, maintaining her composure with icy control. "Good evening, neighbors," Veronica purred into the microphone. "Before we proceed, I want to address the defamatory nonsense circulating this week. Grief can cloud judgment, but I assure you, every action taken by this board has been in full compliance with state law." When she moved to the treasurer's report, I raised my hand. "Point of order, Mrs. Sterling." She ignored me. "Mr. Vance, public comment is scheduled for the end. Not according to the agenda you distributed last night," I replied, my voice carrying over the crowd. "It conveniently excludes the public comment period required by the bylaws." A wave of murmurs swept through the room. Veronica's composure finally flickered, a crack in the porcelain. "We will add time for public comment after the official business," she conceded, gripping the podium so hard her knuckles turned white. The next 45 minutes were pure theater. No one listened to the budget. Phones glowed everywhere. Whispered arguments flared up. When the treasurer finally finished, Veronica turned to me with a forced, triumphant smile, as if she had won the delay. "The floor is now open for public comment, Mr. Vance. Please be brief." I stood up, walked to the podium, and plugged my USB drive into the projector. The lights dimmed, and the screen behind her lit up. "My name is Arthur Vance," I began, my voice clear and calm. "Mrs. Sterling has called me a liar. Tonight, I'm going to show you exactly what she stole." The first slide was the 1992 plat map, the red line screaming off the screen. "This is the original boundary survey from the state archives. My property, and 28 of yours, are explicitly excluded from HOA jurisdiction." Click. The spreadsheet appeared. $1.1 million collected without legal authority. 8 years of fraud. The murmur became a low war. Click. The Sterling Family Trust documentation, showing the transfers from the slush fund. Click. The list of names and losses. Silas Thorne, Helen Miller, the 350 Christmas trees. They were cut down and sold for $85,000 to a company owned solely by your president. Veronica finally found her voice, metallic and sharp. "This is fabricated. These are outdated documents. We filed a boundary adjustment in 2015. I turned to the board secretary, a middle-aged man named Stan, whose face was pale with fear. "Stan," I asked, "as the secretary, can you retrieve the 2015 minutes where the board voted to approve this boundary adjustment?" Stan's eyes darted from Veronica to the screen. He took a breath that sounded like a sob. "Mrs. Sterling, I've searched the files. There are no minutes regarding any boundary adjustment in 2015. Veronica's mask shattered. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Click. The final slide. The email, dated April 3rd, 2016, from Veronica to her board. "I have adjusted the membership roster to include the parcels outside the boundary. Don't worry about legal implications. Nobody ever checks." Silence fell, absolute and suffocating, before the explosion. "That email is fabricated." Veronica shrieked, her control gone. "Who gave you that?" Janet Sterling stood up in the center of the crowd, facing her sister-in-law. "I did, Veronica. I was on the receiving end. And I cannot stay silent anymore." The room became a storm. People were shouting, pointing, chairs scraping the linoleum. Veronica tried to regain order, screaming, "This outsider is trying to destroy everything we built." But nobody was listening to her anymore. The spell was broken. Silas Thorne rose slowly, leaning on his cane, and raised a framed photograph above his head. It showed Veronica, smiling, holding a bitter's paddle next to his pristine 1969 Chevy. "This is my truck," Silas said, his voice cracking with decades of stored pain. "She told me I violated storage codes. It was in my own garage. She sold it for $65,000, and I never saw a cent." One by one, they stood up. Helen Miller with her building permit, the couple who refinanced their mortgage, the 28 excluded neighbors. And then, driven by shared outrage, other homeowners who were inside the boundary began to speak, detailing fines for grass length, arbitrary assessments, and threats they had endured. The chaos reached its zenith. Veronica Sterling, cornered, eyes wild, looked at me. "You built all this with whose money, Mrs. Sterling?" I asked. And then, she confessed. It wasn't a tactical move. It was pure, unadulterated rage and narcissism. "With my money," she screamed. "My husband died and left me $300,000 in debt. No one helped me. No one lifted a finger. So yes, I took what I needed. I earned it. I saved this community, and this is how you repay me." The sudden silence was deafening. At that exact moment, the double doors in the back swung open. Two men in dark suits, followed by Detective Riley, walked in with the unmistakable authority of federal law enforcement. The lead agent, a tall man with an implacable face, approached the stage. "Veronica Sterling," he announced, his voice slicing through the stillness. "I am Special Agent Donovan with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. You are under arrest for wire fraud, mail fraud, and conspiracy to commit theft." The soft click of the handcuffs was the final punctuation mark of the evening. As they led her past me, Veronica's eyes were hollow, empty. She had run out of moves, run out of lies, run out of fight. I remained at the podium, picking up Clara's journal. I opened it to the last blank page and wrote the date. 3 months passed. Veronica accepted a plea deal, 12 years in federal prison, full restitution of the $1.3 million stolen, and a lifetime ban from any fiduciary community role. Her name became a cautionary tale across the country. The 28 victims were compensated. Silas Thorne bought a beautiful 1971 C10, close enough to the one he lost, and he insisted I take the keys to his old Ford pickup just to have something that moves forward. The HOA dissolved the old board, and in the new elections, Stan, the secretary who had finally told the truth, was elected president. His first act was formally removing the 28 properties from all HOA documentation, sending a personal apology to each owner. The first hint of spring arrived on the Dakota Plain. I drove out to the farm, expecting to spend the day alone, thinking about Clara, but when I arrived, I found 40 people waiting at the gate. Silas, Helen, Janet, neighbors I had never spoken to, and even strangers from town who had read the news. They had brought seedlings. 350 Douglas fir saplings, purchased through a community fundraiser. "We thought you might need some help replanting," Silas said, his eyes bright. We worked until sunset, 40 people digging, planting, watering, turning the field of pale stumps back into a promise. Silas planted the very first sapling in the exact spot where Clara had planted hers 15 years ago. That night, sitting on the porch, I opened Clara's journal to my new entry. Below the date, I wrote 5 words. "The roots are still growing." You see, Veronica thought she could steal everything. The money, the truck, the gazebo, and Clara's final memory. But she didn't understand the power of roots. They survive underground, patient, waiting. And when the corruption is finally exposed, they are the first to break through the surface, reminding everyone that truth, like life, will always find a way to grow back. So, tell me, what's the worst HOA abuse you've ever witnessed? Have you ever had to fight a system you knew was rigged? Drop your story in the comments below. Let's expose these petty tyrants and see just how deep those roots of community justice can run. Share this video if you believe the little guy with the truth can always beat the powerful lie.